Sometimes in life, you stumble upon something that leaves a mark, something that resonates, good or bad, a moment that becomes burned into your memory. It becomes a core memory, tied to a specific experience that sticks with you, for better or worse. It could be a moment of joy, a childhood highlight, or even something painful. Regardless, the memory lingers, and when it resurfaces, you're instantly pulled back, flooded with nostalgia or regret. It's powerful, and it shapes how you remember a time in your life. For me, March 27th, 2013 was the day a core memory was born. That was the day Terraria came to Xbox 360. I was 22 years old. I was freshly out of a relationship, tangled in a custody battle over my 6-month-old daughter. I was stuck in a job that drained my soul, trapped in a cycle of stress and self-doubt. My friends, they were living a different life. No kids, no heavy responsibilities. They partied while I tried to keep it together. I felt isolated and alone. I only had my daughter on the weekends, and during the week, I was left alone with my thoughts. And when you're down, your mind has a way of turning everything against you. That's when I found Terraria. I picked it up shortly after launch. I remember the night clearly. I had no work the next day, so I stayed up all night playing. Something about the game made me feel like a kid again, staying up late playing Pokemon Red on my Game Boy, or pulling 2 all-nighters on the weekend to beat Metal Gear Solid 2 after it launched. But this time it was different. I wasn't just playing to have fun, I was escaping the reality of my life at the time. The more I played, the less I thought about the custody battle, about my ex, the dead-end job, and the crushing weight of it all. Instead, I got lost in Terraria's world, mining, crafting, and fighting bosses. I played with an old Xbox Live friend. We reconnected through the game. It wasn't just the game that brought me out of my own head. It was the connection and the conversations, the stupidly fun co-op builds we worked on in Terraria. Slowly, Terraria became a light in the dark time. It didn't cure my depression, but it reminded me that there was still room for joy, even in the smallest things in life. Fast forward 11 years. I'm now 33, I'm married, with 4 kids. Life is a lot different. The struggles of 2013 are a memory, one I reflect on often, but not with the same sting. Terraria remains a beacon from that time, a reminder that even in the hardest moments, there are things that can pull you out of the dark. I don't play Terraria anymore, and those Xbox Live friends have long since faded from my life, but the memory, it's still a part of me. And now, in 2024, Corekeeper entered my life, and it gave me a very similar feeling, just under completely different life circumstances. I stumbled upon Corekeeper while scrolling through Steam last year, still in early access at the time. I remember loading it up and playing for about an hour before forcing myself to stop. I didn't stop because it was bad, it was actually the opposite. It had that rare pull that I hadn't felt in years in a game. The kind of pull where you can sense you're about to sink countless hours into something special. But with work piling up and life being what it is, I had to shelf it. I promised myself I'd come back to it when the time was right, maybe when it exited early access. That time came when Corekeeper fully launched out of early access on August 27th, 2024. I saw it on the Steam front page and I remembered my promise to myself. This time, I had the time to try to dive in. And dive in I did. 60 hours later, I'm here writing the script at 12:29 a.m. while my wife sleeps in the other room after having just played Corekeeper for 6 straight hours herself. It's rare that my wife and I both get pulled into the same game like this. She downloaded Corekeeper onto her laptop after I convinced her, and while I watched, she quickly got the hang of it. She crafted torches, built her first base, mined copper, and started laying out plans for her little underground empire. Seeing her excitement mirrored my own experience just a few days earlier. The game doesn't hold your hand, and yet it naturally leads you through its systems. Every step feels earned, every discovery a small victory. The first time I played Corekeeper, I was lost, fumbling around in the dark, quite literally, pretty much like everybody else. But I began to explore, learn, and build. The satisfaction of creating something even in a pixelated world was addicting. And just as I got to grips with the basics, the game threw new challenges my way. Bosses, farming, electricity, automation. There's always something to learn, something new to build. It's that constant sense of discovery that keeps me hooked. And it's been a long time since a game has done that for me. Now, to appreciate what Corekeeper is today, we really need to understand where it came from. Before we go further, it's important to understand the story behind Corekeeper's creation. This isn't just some random indie game that appeared out of nowhere. It's the product of a small but passionate Swedish studio called Pugstorm. Though relatively new to the gaming scene, Pugstorm's dedication to building a world that players could lose themselves in is evident in every pixel of Corekeeper. Backed by Fireshine Games, a publisher known for supporting innovative indie projects, Corekeeper got the support it needed to reach a broader audience. Pugstorm's prior project, Radical Rabbit Stew, a puzzle action game, was where they cut their teeth, but it was with Corekeeper that they found their stride. The game entered early access in March 2022, And from the beginning, Pugstorm listened closely to the community. They used player feedback to continually tweak and improve the game, rolling out updates that added new bosses, biomes, and mechanics. The Sunken Sea and Desert of Beginnings updates are prime examples of how the game expanded, with entire new areas to explore, making the world feel alive and growing. Of course, development wasn't without its challenges. There were hiccups, like balancing issues, performance problems, and the typical bugs you expect from early access titles. But Pugstorm was quick to address these, releasing hotfixes and patches that kept players engaged. The steady communication helped them build a loyal fan base, and by the time the game hit its 1.0 release in August 2024, it had evolved into a polished and rich experience. The community had embraced Corekeeper with open arms, praising its depth and design, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some players found early frustration in multiplayer performance and certain boss difficulty spikes. Yet, Pugstorm's commitment to ongoing development ensured that many of these issues were ironed out, leaving a game that feels rewarding and immersive in the end. Now, with the game launching on consoles and soon on Nintendo Switch, Corekeeper continues to grow, reaching new audiences. It's a new testament to how a small studio can make a big impact when they're dedicated to their craft. The journey through Corekeeper is one of constant discovery. Much like my wife's first few hours in the game, I started off blind, not knowing where to go or what to do, but the world pulled me in. It was that same kind of magic I felt playing Terraria for the first time all those years ago, losing track of time because every minute brought something new. The first boss I encountered, a gigantic slime, kicked my ass over and over again. It was humbling, and for a while, it seemed like I never figured out how to take it down. But here's the thing about Corekeeper. It rewards preparation, not just brute strength. This isn't a game where you can go out and grind levels or gear and expect to walk all over your enemies if that's all you do. You have to engage with the systems, crafting, cooking, mining, exploring, and even farming. It wasn't until I began using my shovel to clear away the slime on the floor that I realized I had a fighting chance at that boss fight. It wasn't until I crafted better gear and created foods that provided buffs using ingredients I had scavenged that I finally stood a chance. When I went back into that fight after hours of planning and preparation, I crushed that boss. And that's what Corekeeper does so well. It's not about making things hard for the sake of being hard. It's about making your effort count. The game wants you to engage with every system it offers, and when you do, the payoff is incredibly satisfying. With that victory behind me, I felt confident. And then I stumbled upon the next boss, a massive tunneling worm that circled the map, lurking beneath the surface, waiting to devour me whole. This worm seemingly came out of nowhere, and like the slime boss before it, it taught me a brutal lesson in humility. After a few failed attempts to take it down, I had to rethink my approach entirely. This time, I focused on magic, upgrading my gear to prioritize mana regeneration, and I set up spike traps, a lot of them, along the worm's path. I was learning that every boss had its own rhythm and weaknesses, and it was up to me to figure out how to exploit them. The satisfaction I felt when that giant worm finally went down, it's hard to put into words. The best part is that even though I lost countless hours to trial and error, it never felt like wasted time. I was constantly improving, not just in terms of gear, but in how I approached the game itself. Every time I returned to my base, I tweaked my setup, building better crafting stations, organizing my storage, experimenting with new mechanics like electricity and drills. The depth of the game kept revealing itself in layers, like an onion. Speaking of base building, Corekeeper excels in this area in ways that are both intuitive and endlessly satisfying. What starts as a basic survival instinct, digging out a hole to hide from enemies and store your meager loot, quickly transforms into something far more elaborate. Before you know it, that hole in the dirt evolves into a sprawling, organized hub of activity, or unorganized if you're other people. There's a unique satisfaction in not just building a base for the sake of survival, but building one that works. A system that hums with precision, where every room has a purpose and every purpose feeds into your larger goal. At first, my base was just a small hideout. A place to store the essentials, a crafting table, a couple of chests, and a fire to keep the darkness at bay. But as I spent more time gathering resources and unlocking new crafting stations, I realized how integral a well-designed base was to my progression. I didn't just want a place to dump my stuff, I needed a base that streamlined every aspect of my gameplay: crafting, cooking, storage, and exploration. The game's crafting system is rich and versatile, allowing you to build anything from basic tools to advanced machinery. I started by setting up dedicated rooms for each major activity: a crafting room where I could access all my workbenches and forges, a storage room organized with chests full of ores and materials and consumables, and even a kitchen where I could cook food for buffs before venturing out into the unknown. Each room had its function, and over time I tweaked and optimized them to make my routine as efficient as possible when I'd come back to base. And then there's the farming system. Early on, I began planting crops, things like mushrooms, root vegetables, and even rare flowers. I needed to keep my food supplies steady. These crops weren't just for filling my hunger bar, they became essential to crafting more complex meals that would give me valuable buffs for combat or exploration. I found myself spending time carefully designing an underground garden, organizing crops in neat rows so I could easily harvest them, and setting up a dedicated chest nearby to store seeds and extra produce. But what really elevated my base building experience was the automation system, a game changer that shifted how I thought about resource gathering. By this point, I had spent hours and hours mining resources manually. The grind was starting to wear on me, but it's pretty typical for a game like this. Then I discovered drills, one of the coolest mechanics Corekeeper has to offer. Drills allowed me to tap into very large resource deposits like ore boulders, which made mining obsolete in certain areas. I set up my first drill to mine 10, and suddenly I didn't have to spend hours swinging my pickaxe anymore. Drills are just the beginning. Corekeeper introduces a fully fledged automation system that uses electricity and conveyor belts to create automated processes to everything from farming to mining. Once I got the hang of it, I built an automated wood farm, using conveyor belts to transport logs. This freed me up from the mundane task of farming materials, letting me focus on the more exciting aspects of the game, like exploring dangerous new biomes, facing down bosses, and crafting more advanced items. The beauty of Corekeeper is that it allows for as much or as little automation as you want. You're never forced to automate anything. You can keep things as hands-on as you like, but the game rewards you for experimenting with its systems. And the deeper you dive into automation, the more you realize how interconnecting everything is. The sense of control and accomplishment you feel when your base becomes a well-oiled machine is unparalleled. While I could have simply set up the most practical and functional base possible, I found myself spending the time designing it to feel like home. I started experimenting with decorations, painting the walls, painting the different rooms, adding cozy lighting. You can change the chest color. I even created an artificial lake near my base for no other reason than I thought it would be cool to put a lake down and have a tree inside of it. It had no practical function, but it added a sense of personality to my world. That's the kind of freedom Corekeeper offers. You can build a functional base, but you can also build a beautiful one. As I expanded my base, I discovered NPCs that could be housed there, giving me access to new items and services. These NPCs required specific rooms and setups, adding yet another layer of depth to the base building. The more I invested in my base, the more it began to feel like a living, breathing part of the game's world, rather than just a functional hub. The complexity of these systems might sound overwhelming, but Corekeeper is honestly masterful at introducing them gradually. They don't start out with drills and conveyor belts. You begin with basic tools and slowly unlock the more advanced technology as you progress. This gradual learning curve means that by the time you're ready to dive into automation, it feels like natural progression. You want to be more efficient because you want to go do more things, so you need more items. It's a brilliant way of keeping the player engaged, always giving you something new to discover while never making the system feel daunting. Once your base is set up and running efficiently, you can shift your focus back to the game's broader exploration and combat systems. Knowing that your base is functioning in the background, automatically gathering resources and organizing your stockpile, it gives you the freedom to explore more dangerous regions, hunt down bosses, and discover even more about the game's sprawling underground world. You're no longer tied down by the need to constantly gather materials. You've built something that works for you. In short, Corekeeper's base building and automation systems are where creativity meets efficiency. It's not just about survival, it's about thriving, creating a home base that evolves with you as you progress. The game gives you the tools to build something that's both practical and personal, and it rewards you for engaging with the deeper systems. Whether you're setting up an automated ore mine, planting an efficient underground farm, or simply building a lake for fun, Corekeeper lets you make the world your own. For me, this is what makes the game so special. The base I've built isn't just a place to stash my gear, it's a reflection of my journey through Corekeeper. From that first humble hole in the ground to a sprawling automated machine, it's become the heart of my experience in the game, and just like everything else in Corekeeper, it's something I look forward to sharing with others. The third boss that I encountered was different from the others, a hulking fire demon locked inside of a dungeon that I had to fight my way into. I had to fight my way to find the entrance to the dungeon to fight my way to the boss. Unlike the previous bosses, this one required summoning, and he came with a whole new set of challenges. The dungeon was crawling with fire enemies, and I had to carefully clear each room, stocking up on supplies and prepping my loadout before summoning the boss. This fight wasn't just about brute strength. It was about endurance, dodging fireballs, avoiding deadly ground attacks, and constantly repositioning to stay out of danger. And just when I thought I had him, when I finally got his health down to 0, he regenerated, enraged, faster, and more dangerous than ever. I died quite a few times to this boss, but Corekeeper had conditioned me to keep pushing. I adjusted my strategy, got better gear, I gained some levels in my health, and I went back for round 2. It was an intense battle, one that saw me using every skill and tool I had learned up until that point. When I finally beat him, both phases, It was one of those fist-pumping moments where everything just clicked in the game, and it was fun. From the very start, the game refuses to hold your hand, and that's what makes the journey feel like your own. Sure, there's a general path forward, but it's up to you to uncover the details. Early on, I wondered how deep the rabbit hole went. Were the first few biomes all there were to see? Then I stumbled across a hidden cavern, teeming with enemies far stronger than anything I had faced before. It hit me, there's so much more to explore, and the game hadn't even begun to show its full hand. Each biome feels like its own world. The early areas, the dirt biome, the clay caves, are just the beginning, with relatively simple challenges to overcome. Once you venture beyond the first few areas to start finding regions that require completely different strategies, the world doesn't just grow in size, it grows in complexity. Suddenly, it's not about just fighting bosses or building a base. Now you're contending with environmental hazards, rare resources that require specific tools to harvest, and enemies that test the limits of your gear and planning. This is where Corekeeper shines. Each new region doesn't just add more of the same, it introduces new mechanics and challenges that keep you on your toes. And with every question answered, the game throws another one at you. I kept asking myself, what's next? Will the world ever stop revealing new secrets? The joy of Corekeeper comes not only from overcoming challenges, but also from the sheer freedom to experiment. I remember the moment I realized the game had a fishing mechanic. At first, I wasn't sure if fishing would be worth the time. It's a simple minigame, but once I hooked my first few catches, I quickly learned that fishing wasn't just a casual distraction. It was another layer of depth to the crafting and cooking systems. Certain fish provided ingredients that could be combined with other foods to create very powerful buffs for combat and exploration. The best part? The game doesn't demand you rush through it. You aren't under constant pressure to complete quests or reach milestones with a certain time frame. Corekeeper rewards you for taking your time, for wandering off the beaten path, for experimenting with different food combinations, weapons, and strategies. I've spent hours not just reorganizing my base, but making it better. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I made my storage system more efficient, set up specific rooms for crafting, farming, and cooking, and kept tweaking things until I was satisfied. It never felt like a grind because I always had something to look forward to. Even the combat system offers variety as you progress. Sure, early on, you're wielding basic swords and ranged weapons like bows, but as you explore more biomes and defeat tougher enemies, you unlock far more creative tools for destruction. Magic becomes a real option with stabs that cast elemental attacks. There's something for everyone. Whether you want to bash your enemies with a gigantic hammer or stand back and rain fireballs from a distance. And the progression just doesn't stop at better weapons. You also have skill trees that evolve as you use certain weapons or perform certain tasks, giving the game an RPG-like progression system that feels personal to your playstyle. The sense of exploration and discovery never wanes. Even with hours of gameplay, there's always something new to uncover, some mechanic you didn't fully grasp yet, or some area you haven't explored. There's no sense of finality because the world keeps expanding. That's what makes Corekeeper so addictive. You're never done. There's always another layer of complexity, another system to master, and another region to conquer. In Corekeeper, curiosity is king. You're encouraged to try things out, to see what works and what doesn't. You can mess around with the electricity systems, automate entire sections of your base, or build elaborate defense structures just to see how far you can push the game's mechanics. Every time I think I've figured the game out, it surprises me again. Whether it's with a new resource I didn't know existed, or a biome that requires a whole new set of skills to navigate. And that's the magic of Corekeeper. It never stops giving. You're always learning, always discovering, and always improving. Even after 60 hours, I feel like I've just scratched the surface. And that's an incredible feeling in a world where so many games rush you towards the end game. With Corekeeper, it's not about the destination. It's about the journey, and that journey is filled with endless possibility. As I mentioned earlier, Corekeeper is starting to etch itself into my own set of core memories, much like Terraria did all those years ago. It's not just another game to fill the free time between work and responsibility. It's quickly becoming something much more meaningful. I felt it when my wife lit up when she wanted to talk about her latest discovery or proudly show me the upgrades she made to her base. There's something special about watching someone you care about fall into the same rabbit hole you did, not because you pushed them into the hole, but because the game captivated them on its own terms. For me, it's not just about my own journey anymore. It's about sharing that journey with others. When she figured out the crafting system on her own, calling me over to show off her first house, and then diving into strategies to improve it, it wasn't just the fact that she was playing that had me excited, it was the way she was playing. The game had pulled her into its world just like it had done with me a few days earlier. Watching her navigate the dark caves, slowly lighting up the tunnels, and mining her first veins of copper, it felt like we were on a parallel path, even though we were playing solo. Every time she'd figure something out, it reminded me of my own first steps, and it reignited that sense of wonder all over again. We spent time talking about the base layouts and what we were building and what we wanted to explore. At one point, I had just finished setting up an automated wood farm using drills and electricity. I was so excited, I felt like Willy Wonka. I wanted to show her how it worked, how the system just churned out resources without me having to lift a finger. She was equally excited to share her own progress. Her base had grown from a simple hole in the ground into a multi-roomed hole in the ground. We bounced ideas off each other, discussing whether we should go for aesthetics or efficiency, whether it was better to have a massive storage room or separate rooms for each different crafting material. These conversations weren't just about the game, they were about us building something together, even if it was just in our own separate worlds. But it's more than just base building and automation, it's about the shared discovery. Corekeeper has this ability to make you feel like you're constantly on the verge of uncovering something new. Whether it's a new biome, a hidden chest, or a perfect combination of ingredients for a powerful buff, the game keeps you curious, keeps you learning. And that sense of discovery becomes so much more enjoyable when you can share it with someone else. My wife and I aren't just talking about stats or upgrades. We're sharing our excitement over the little thing, like the first time she encountered a giant enemy that nearly flattened her, or when I finally figured out how to set up an efficient farming system. The idea of sitting down on a weekend, working together to take down a boss or explore a new biome, it's more than just gaming, it's creating memories. And that's what makes Corekeeper more than just another survival game to me. It's not just about the mechanics, its bosses or the base building systems. It's about the moments those systems create, the excitement of a shared discovery, the satisfaction of overcoming a challenge together, and the joy of building something, whether it's in the game or in real life. It's a game that brings people together, and that's why it's already secured a place in my own collection of core memory. As a gamer, you sometimes think, as you grow older, these experiences won't hit you the same way. You think that nothing will ever give you that same rush you felt as a kid, staying up all night playing something new and exciting. But Corekeeper reminded me that those moments don't disappear, they just evolve. Now instead of sitting alone in the dark with my controller, I'm sitting next to my wife, excitedly talking about what we'll do next in the game. Corekeeper is a game that taps into that same magic I felt when I first played Terraria. It's a game of discovery, of constant learning, and of creating something meaningful out of nothing. It's a game that reminds me of why I love gaming in the first place. That feeling of getting lost in a world, forgetting about the stress of life for a while, and just playing. If you haven't checked out Corekeeper yet, I highly recommend it. It's available on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation currently, and will soon be on the Nintendo Switch. Whether you're diving in solo or with friends or family, there's something here that will grab you, something that will pull you in and keep you coming back for more. I'm Drew, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe. This is my first video, but I plan on doing retrospectives, deep dives, and story-driven pieces about the games that have left a lasting impression on me and my life. Thank you for watching, and I hope you check out Corekeeper on your platform of choice. It might just become one of your core memories too.